I'm going to move to John now, because I know that he is probably on the edge of his seat after hearing those experts, and so that certainly understanding, where some work has already been done through the International Chamber of Commerce and the international private sector, who routinely bring together businesses from all around the world, including across Africa, to try to think through some of these issues. So, John, we're going to be really looking to, as we work together, borrow some of those innovations and ideas, but more specifically, we'd really just like to get your views on where you believe e-trade could or should be in Africa with the right collaborations in place, with a particular focus as well on the whole e-customs agenda, and how that could support the African continental free trade area. But also, one thing that my private sector colleagues are routinely raising with me and us, and we've had this conversation and you've been very receptive on it, as well as our counterparts in government, which is how can the likes of the ICC, as a global body linked in with all of the sort of international policy-making fora, assist us address some of these world trade imbalances that the continent suffers from, such as market access and some of the regulatory challenges on the trade finance front, through some of the issues associated with, some of the financial crime related issues where KYC and the AML rather, which is perfect, it needs to be in place, but it's just having that adverse effect on some of our SMEs, creating a very substantial trade finance deficit on the continent. So we'd be very interested to just get your views on those aspects. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hubert, and it's great to be able to participate in a discussion with colleagues. Can I say what really, I really do want to praise you for your openness to engagement with the private sector. That's not always the case globally, where since government coordinated institutions are not as open, and I think the fact that you're signalling your openness to engagement with the private sector and the humility you bring to your role, which is really in a way matched by the private sector's humility. We don't know all the answers either, but we do know that collaborating together in an open way, in a high trust way, can often deliver better results. So I would also urge you, to the extent you can, and we would certainly urge the government within the African Union, who boldly signed up almost to a counter-narrative in support of free trade with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Don't let this opportunity be delayed. And the sooner we can get the framework for a functioning market of such importance in Africa, I think the sooner we'll be able to support the redressing of some of the imbalances, and particularly facilitating the greater trade and investment within the African continent, which is such an important continent. And I think we're all devastated by the challenges at a macroeconomic perspective that Africa is confronting, having gone from positive to looking at a few years now of negative, and we know the human consequences of that. So we are united, if I can, in supporting the functioning as soon as possible of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I can assure you that we stand ready, willing, and are very engaged in the prospect of supporting you in Accra in your job in actually developing a functioning free trade area within Africa. I can also take this opportunity quickly to shout out to my friend Yukio. I think it would be good if people understood very well how closely the ICC and the World Customs Organization actually work together. In fact, we put out a joint statement about 2 days ago, in a way, ensuring that the world is aware that in confronting the challenges of the slowdown and the difficulties in trade flows, that the world should be assured that the World Customs Organization is engaging intensely with the private sector to see if we can work our way through these sorts of issues as well. And I'll talk a little bit before I close about some of the innovations we have together. But it is great to be on a call with you, Pio, and I don't think you should underestimate the level of intensity that the WCO has brought to ensuring that it has an effective response globally to some of the challenges that COVID-19 throws up. Just a couple of specific points if I can. And I think as both Hubert and as Wakmili has already said, I mean, if there's anything that's we've learned about COVID-19 and the consequences of dealing with it, is that paralysis by paper, the need to present paper, the requirement to attend offices in an era where, in order to manage better the risks of the contamination of the epidemic, the pandemic, and the infection is constrained by our social distancing, then there is simply a requirement to rely upon digitalisation. And if nothing else, and this is a negative, it has shown in some economies, and in particular some regions, the level of underinvestment that has occurred, I think, in a number of economies, and in Africa as well, in the digitalisation of a range of sectors. It's great to hear the good stories about the digital pharmacies. It's great to hear the good stories about digital access to medicine. But sometimes people allow that to become a sense that that is the prevailing reality. It's not. In fact, the take-up of digital technology is still not high enough, and there are still too many inhibitors about its full utilisation. So we think it's incredibly important that, and that's why I think the way in which Hubert brings together, I think, groups of people to engage in discussions about what reforms need to be made and what are the best fora for those reforms is very important. And in terms of what we need to do with digital, particularly in the African continent, there is no better place than a combination of the African Union and a functioning African Continental Free Trade Agreement and an effective secretariat that Wakmili has already indicated he is building to actually grapple with these issues. And it needs to be prioritised as an issue. And we need to prioritise the development and investment in digital-related infrastructure. Because if we don't, then that negative period that we're looking at in terms of negative growth in Africa will be longer and deeper. We need to move to that. In order to move to paperless trading, it requires holistic interventions across legal, regulatory, and public-private partnerships at a legal level. And actually, it's useful sometimes, and I think that's one reason I was also very glad to hear Wakmili's comments, being open to ideas from elsewhere. You know, there are economies which are actually creating frameworks and actually implementing existing frameworks effectively and utilising that as a source of advantage. Singapore is one. Some of you will know that I have built my the ICC's digital hub out of Singapore for a bunch of reasons. But importantly, because they saw the very early on in the late 90s the importance of the ICCITRAL, Modern Law on Electronic Transfers, Transferable Records Convention. And what that does, it actually accords effectively to the nominated paper documents which are translated into digital documents the same legal effect. And last year, the Singapore government moved to bring documents like bills of lading, etc., out of the excluded zone and put it into the included zone, which means there is the capacity to give legal force to those documentation. That kind of legal support is actually available in framework form. It's a question then of how can economies and how can governments and how can institutions that support them and how can the private sector align, in a sense, to accelerate the adoption of that, to enable that to happen. And frankly, on a regulatory basis, there are things that can just happen. I mean, in Algeria already, the Algerian Central Bank has actually voided the requirement that trade finance administration documents need to be in paper form. And they did that through executive action. So these things can happen. And I think that together, what we would like to do with the ICC, if it's convenient for you, Wakmili, is to spend some time helping you think through at least discussion papers about how you can accelerate focus on this. Because as I said before, paralysis by paper may well be one of the great inhibitors to the continuation and prolongation, to the deterioration in trade flows. Anything we can do to shift that, some of it by executive fiat through, as the Algerian Central Bank has done, others by actually moving very quickly to adopt schedules of existing conventions using examples from other economies we're very happy, if it's of interest to you, to work together to do that as well. We're also been very impressed, by the way. The African Union's done a lot of work already, but the fact is we need to increase the investment into digital trade initiatives. And so what Hubert's doing through the Africa PLC Industrial and E-Trade Marketplace Initiative is one we fully support. But what we like is also what the African Union Development Agency has done with its 5% agenda, where it seeks to create institutional investor public-private partnerships, to get African institutional investors. And there's a separate discussion we'll be continuing, I think, tomorrow with sovereign wealth funds and pension funds on these issues. Because what we want to do is help them see the benefit of applying this to increase the allocation of their investment into necessary digital infrastructure so that they can actually move that whole story along quite quickly. You mentioned as well, I think one of the challenges we're starting to see right now, we're seeing it on a global basis on the issue with the collapse of trade, and you see the curve of trade come out. There's actually the risk of a very difficult return to full trading. And one of the consequences of that, or one of the reasons for that, is the pressure that we're building on trade finance. We are actually starting and working on a campaign, as we did in 08-09, which was very successful, in actually building up the muscles to improve the capacity to have access to trade finance. Our estimate is that we're actually got to squeeze at about $1.7 trillion. At the moment, it's not being felt as intensely, though we're starting to see, even in developed economies, almost 1 in 5 businesses are struggling to get access to trade finance in the UK alone. And we're seeing that increase depending upon the risk profiles of various economies. What we need to do is ensure that we don't wait until trade is at a pressure point again. We need to act now to enable supply chains to start functioning. Because any supply chain to be reignited will take 90 to 120 days. We need to ensure that we've got access and liquidity available in the trade finance market. So we'll be working with multilateral development banks, we'll be working with export credit facility agencies, and we'll be working with the Basel III regulators in terms of the flexibility that needs to be shown as well there. Because we need to ensure that the world is ready to actually provide support for the return to trade, but also enable that at the same time. Hubert mentioned this issue of KYC and AML. We're also very engaged on another challenge we see at the moment. This challenge has simply been exacerbated by COVID, which has been the collapse of correspondent banking, the challenges of remittances. We've been doing a special project at the moment with the CARICOM economies about the way in which we can help lead a discussion about the reignition of correspondent banking by using digital weapons, digital tools to enable that, by using algorithms, etc. So we're working on that, and obviously it's something we're very conscious of in Africa as well. As it is an issue in Central Europe, it's an issue in the South Pacific, where the collapse of correspondent banking is also harming the real economy. But importantly, the costs of remittances, which many economies rely upon, are going up as a result of the collapse of correspondent banking, or the access to it is so much more expensive now. So we're working on those sorts of projects as well. So how do you get the right risk weighting around KYC and AML? And a lot of that we think is going to be algorithmic driven. And I know bankers hate talking about fintech interventions, but frankly, the fintech approach may well be one of the most important. And what we're doing is lending and involving the prestige and the institutional integrity of the ICC to try and work out our solutions. I mentioned briefly that obviously we have a keen interest on customs issues. We look at that for a number of reasons, but in particular, if you think about trade, it needs to flow through countries, and enabling customs operations to be as efficient as possible is a critical issue for us. We created the Global Alliance on Trade Facilitation, which brings together economies in challenged and developing markets with businesses and with development agencies to try and nut out how we can actually get full access of trade facilitation provisions in the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. We've got a number of projects on, but importantly, in Morocco, we've already completed a project now which has lowered the cost of phytosanitary inspections by using digital tools. We've done that working with the customs agency, with the port authority, with the development agency, and with businesses like DHL. I mean, the point is that we're actually dealing with real issues, not theoretical development issues, where we're actually identifying real problems in an economy. We're actually now working with Ghana and Kenya as well, introducing risk management systems and pre-arrival processes, all being done on a digital basis as well. So as I said before, at a high level, ensuring that the African policy system, policy frameworks are enabling of digital, seeing that there's an opportunity to utilize existing frameworks, possibly faster than people have realized, and actually borrowing models from other economies. We stand really able to work with the Secretary in Accra to see if we can help on that. We also think that if we can help in terms of creating environments to enable greater investment into the development of digital infrastructure, we're really willing and able. We're extremely engaged on the issue of enabling trade finance. I should have mentioned that because of the role of the ICC, particularly in our banking sector, we've already flexed our rules to actually make it possible to enable access to trade finance without the utilization of people-to-people contact. So these sorts of things are very important. And finally, we think working with the customs agency, the port agency, to ensure goods move as quickly as possible through to enable trade flows to continue, there is a digital solution to that as well. So thanks very much, Hubert, for the opportunity to participate. I look forward to hearing my colleagues.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.